is not really adequate to describe the fishery, and we probably spent a good portion of the session actually discussing the definition of what we were trying to talk about. In generally, we were considering it as a food fishery, not just an Aboriginal food fishery, but food for residents. It was generally concluded it's a significant portion of the economy, but not one that's tracked. It's when you look at the replacement value of not having that seafood in your fridge and freezer as part of your diet, there's a significant there would be a significant negative impact to local communities. In fact, one study was brought up that showed that given equal where was it here? Given the same economic indicators in health, that those who have access to wild food actually have healthier life indicators than those that don't have access, given the other same economic indicators of household income and education and so on and so forth. The abundance to the food fishery, the species that are being targeted for the food fishery, the abundance is really tied to a lot of other activities that are going on, ranging from forestry to commercial fisheries and so on and so forth. And in general, access to the resource is declining. There's less access to the resorts. It's farther away from communities. There's a cost to put gas in the tank that's just a lot of local economies just can't support anymore. The final area that I touched on was on marine-based tourism. And generally, there was a low enthusiasm in the crowd for marine-based tourism, not just based on the fact it was the last topic of the day and low energy, but there's a perceived lack of local benefit to tourism. It's a short season, low-paying jobs, high capital to develop the tourism. A lot of ownership from outside the region. Recreation use appears to be increasing, but there's no hard numbers to quantify that, and there's a lot of external factors that mitigate any potential benefits from tourism.
Thanks, Dave.
So,
are you ready to, or who's going to make your presentation?
So I did, well, I'm going to report out on enforcement and research. So you have to forgive me, I have real big notes to look at here as we scribed all this on the board while we were going. It's okay, I think I'm fine. So in my group on research and enforcement, we started off by redefining research. We expanded the definition. It was felt that it was important to include not just academia research, but also community research, local knowledge research, commercial research. So try and capture the whole spectrum of research. So we expanded the definition of that. And on the enforcement side, we didn't have a definition, so we worked as a group to come up with a definition for that. And what we settled on was to ensure some of the elements of enforcement were captured in our definition. So we said compliance and monitoring associated with the acts and legislation in place in the Pensima area and how they are regulated and administered locally or in region. So that's where we started. We came up with a number of issues, and we ebbed and flowed between research and enforcement, and it'll be my job after today to separate them out. But I'll just read them off as they came. So one of the concerns what we heard of was the lack of enforcement around, lack of funding around enforcement, some of the issues around engaging and working with existing fleets, users of resources and that type of thing on enforcement. There were different levels of credibility, people thought, when looking at different types of research, so we had to make sure we were clear on that and saw that as an issue. That was a research issue. And then some of the environmental impacts of research itself, what was mentioned, it was around seismic drilling or those types of things that may actually cause environmental impacts. That was identified as a concern. Okay. Quite a bit of discussion on enforcement, concerns around the lack of or the perceived lack of specific types of activities being enforced, concern around monitoring of enforcement activities, such as fish farms was mentioned as an example, the imbalance of enforcement, lots of issues around how we do enforcement, those types of things. There was quite a lot of discussion on that point in the issues section. On research again, we talked a lot about socioeconomic types of information, research that was there, some of the things that we should consider in that perspective, some discussion about types of research that were about to begin, had happened in the past, and some of the tools and the need for government funding for some of the mechanisms and capacity building that could help with research. So there's some of the issues, and I apologize, we're bouncing back and forth, but we're trying to capture a couple of things in that group, so it's kind of disjointed a bit. On the trends, again, on the enforcement side, there was a lack of communication between enforcement bodies. There was a mention of all the organizations that are involved in enforcement not being able to compute in a timely way to properly enforce using their collaborative resources. Also, the issue of communications between jurisdictions. Some of the incentives to comply with enforcement, and we felt there was a whole knowledge gap around why people do or do not comply with enforcement efforts. Also, it was felt that there should be more of a trend towards local people being more involved in enforcement, and utilization of technology in enforcement, and the whole perspective of downloading from government to commercial and local agencies the requirement for enforcement. On the research side, we're concerned about the trend or the need to better understand the climate implications of research needs there, and how we're seeing more investment in that, but at the same time there seemed to be a decline in other types of research taking place around communities. Concern around research being funded by NGOs and industry, and that it might be a bit disjointed, and that there was an opportunity for additional funding to make more research more coordinated to better meet the needs of the region. And we talked about some of the partnerships that we were seeing and how we felt that that was a good model to follow for the future. Some of our interactions. We talked about the role guardian programs could play, stream keepers. We talked about making data more available on the research front, the role the environmental assessment process was having as far as research goes, and how some of this had be coming to play, and we'd like to see that become more prevalent. And I think that's good. Okay.